today is Kelsa Pilkington. They are a local artist and published writer who has written about their own experiences and those of others surviving through poverty and austerity. Please put your hands together and say welcome for me.
This is quite exciting. So basically, yeah, my name's Kelsa. As you can probably tell from the accent, I'm not from around these parts. I'm actually from Northern Ireland. But I've lived in St Helens for 22 years now. I've gone native, I've eaten a pie, I'm here to stay. And I did most of my growing up on the estate many of us fondly know as Beth House. So that was the time. We lived in social housing. I was a child of single dad of 3, living on benefits. We had it quite hard. I grew up in poverty, and well, writing throughout my childhood was basically a form of escapism. I used to write fantasy stories, a lot of adventure, romance, landscapes, grand feasts, because that was my way of getting away from the reality of my life. But as I entered adulthood, I realised that I could write to tackle the difficult realities as well. I've written on poverty a fair few times over the past year because I've been horrified to observe the way patterns from my childhood are repeating themselves. The way that, like my family struggled decades ago, many others continue to struggle today. Some appallingly struggle even harder. So, I want to tell you a story. It was my story once, but now it's the story of so many other people. It's a tale of division, dichotomy, the unfathomable chasm between the people at the bottom and the people at the top. And it's a tale plucked, unfortunately, from real life. The realities of the people living all around us and the realities of those working in Parliament who are supposedly there to represent the UK population and its interests. So, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation estimates that 1 in 5 people live in relative poverty, a number that many fear will rise as the cost of living crisis, or the cost of greed crisis, as I prefer to call it, escalates. Yes. Many people live in poor quality housing, living on wages that leave them facing decisions that no human being should ever have to face: heat or eat. Over a 3-year period, MPs claimed £200,000 to heat their second homes. Not their first home, but their second. The Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, which was created following the 2009 expenses scandal, found that 301 MPs chose to insulate themselves from the cost of living crisis using taxpayer money. A list of MPs that includes our new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, or as I like to call her, Wish.com, Margaret Thatcher. Meanwhile, the ordinary working population of the UK has been watching the news and the weather anxiously, tracking the drop in temperatures and the possibility of storms from the Arctic, wondering when the time will come that they finally have to put the heating on if they can afford it. This is especially concerning for our elderly and politically vulnerable. In Parliament, MPs can enjoy a 3-course meal at a discount price, subsidised by British taxpayers. Their menu includes dishes such as balsamic and thyme honey beetroot tartar with Gold Cross goat's cheese mousse. Say that's a mouthful, bloody hell. Granny Smith apple and micro celery, slow cooked pork belly with pancetta and root vegetable spelt, crisp kale, salt baked swede and gooseberry and hazelnut cake. Sounds more potential than an M&S advert, doesn't it? It sounds a bit fancy. So, meanwhile, the Brussels Trust distributed a staggering 2.1 million food parcels in the UK between April 2021 and March 2022. That's an increase of 81% against the equivalent period 5 years earlier, so if you kind of think then versus now, that's astonishing. That's nearly 6,000 a day. Food banks rely on the kindness of the public to gather donations to operate, but some have reported struggling as fewer people can actually afford to donate because of everything that's going on. There's now over 1,400 Brussels Trust food banks and at least 1,172 independent ones, that's according to the most recent stats that I could find. This makes a nationwide total of at least 2,600, and that's twice as many as the number of McDonald's restaurants, which is about 1,367 as of this year. Think about that in terms of the scale, right? So we've got Matthews just down there on Church Street, right? For that there's at least 2 food banks, yeah? There's one in Shalom Way, West Stoke Way. For that, that's another 2 food banks. The Macca's a liquid, that's another 2 for you. Earl's Camp, there you go, that's at least 8 ticket altogether on average here in St Helens alone. That's atrocious. And I think the worst part about it is, people blame food banks, I've noticed, like I've seen online, people say food banks enable poor people to be poor. It's really bizarre, and at the same time though, you'll get Conservative MPs smiling as they cut the ribbon to yet another one. And then they'll turn around and shame us for using them, and I just think that's really, really bizarre, you know. Yeah, exactly. You've got NHS workers use food banks, I've had to use a food bank. Council workers, yeah, exactly. It's, you know, these are working people who, you know, they're not just sitting at home on benefits. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but these are people who are working, they're still having to go to food banks because wages just aren't covering the cost of living, you know. So yeah, it's a big bugbear of mine because, as I say, being to a food bank, I know what it's like. It's not fun. So in April, MPs received a pay rise of 2.7%. That works out as an extra $2,200. It would have been more, but they had to do a U-turn after considering pressure. For many MPs, a 2.7 increase is neither here nor there. I had a hard time finding up-to-date statistics, but a disproportionate number of MPs are actually millionaires. That's a drop in the ocean for them. At one point, 2/3 of David Cameron's government were millionaires, compared to only 2% of the general population at the time, which is completely unrepresentative of the voting base. So the number of millionaires in the UK has increased. It's up to 4% now. But this doesn't mean that we're getting richer, although some people would have you believe that's the trend it represents. While the number of millionaires increases, so too does the number of people in poverty, which signifies a widening wealth gap. The national minimum wage went up this year by a paltry 6.6%, and that's an extra 65 pence every hour. The living wage, which is only optional for employers to pay, went up by £1. So people working full-time will receive an extra £5.20 a day on the minimum wage, or £26 a month. Sounds great, that, doesn't it? Sounds amazing. And it's not livable when the cost of living has been, well, it's seen its largest increase now in almost 40 years. So it just doesn't track. It doesn't track. Housing. The housing market is expected to crash as a result of this latest recession. We've already got a massive issue with private renting here in the UK. People being forced out of their homes due to extortionate rent hikes. Single people being seen as unreliable, getting turned away for housing. So basically, if you're a single person, the only hope you've got is crashing with family, joining a house share, which means you've got no privacy, shared space, it's a nightmare. You might have horrible housemates, it's just not a way to live. There's a lack of available housing on the market as renters understandably try to stay put for as long as they possibly can in these uncertain times. But the housing crash paired with the cost of living crisis carries the risk of swaying homeowners having to sell up for cheap in order to survive and then start renting, which then compounds the problem. Predatory landlords will soon find themselves in a market teeming with prey. And the problem goes beyond the price and the availability. The Good Home Inquiry in 2021, they took a look at England's housing stock, and they found that 2 million homes pose a serious danger to the inhabitants. We're talking cold homes, mouldy homes, houses with damage to structural integrity, houses that are unsuitable for human habitation basically. And there's a knock-on effect because these poor quality homes cost the NHS a whopping £1.4 billion every year. That's a lot. That's a lot. Nobody should have to live in a damaged home, you know, a damp and freezing home. No one should have to do it, and yet millions of people do. And overwhelmingly, it's our elderly, our disabled, and our vulnerable. And being a homeowner doesn't necessarily save you from this. Like a startling number of people who get onto the property ladder, they can't go lucky stars until they realise that they can't afford costly repairs on top of everything else. And what about tax? Let's talk about tax. So I'm finally lucky enough to be a taxpayer after years of basically doing low-paid part-time jobs around university. I don't mind paying tax as long as it goes to the right places, such as improving infrastructure, funding the NHS, and helping the folks who need a bit of a leg up, because I've been there, I know what it's like, and I want to make sure no one else has the childhood that I did. And if I avoided paying that tax, quite rightly I'd get a hefty fine, I'd get up to 7 years in prison. But then I'm just a junior software developer. I can't move money